Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us at our second online Friends briefing on the issue of land, liberty, or land, lives and liberty, a 5-point plan to save rural South Africa. My name is Hermann Pretorius. I'm the Deputy Head of Policy Research for the Institute of Race Relations. And yesterday we had our first online briefing about this 5-point plan, where we spoke about the individual's ability to be secure and safe and what could be done in that regard. Today, we move on to a central issue of the 5-point plan. And when I say central, I don't just mean it's the third of 5 points and it's central in that regard. I mean it is a fundamental issue because in this country, property rights has become such a massive issue. And to explore why it is an issue not just in abstract, in theory, but why it is a very real issue for rural South Africa. I am joined today by the great Mr. Terence Corrigan, who is the IRR's project manager and our in-house head honcho when it comes to the issue of property rights, broad experience, incredible knowledge, and also a rather impressive catalogue of 1980s film references that combine into an impressive package, and someone who has been fighting for property rights in the best sense of the word. So when it comes to property rights, and Terence is there and he says, get to the chopper, you get to the chopper. He knows what he's talking about on this. Terence, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, and thank you for that extraordinary word of welcome. The 1980s did have the best movies, though, must be said. Conan the Barbarian, very, very good.
So I think a first question I think should look at, and I'm trying to see if there's a way I can make it related to Conan the Barbarian, but I don't think I'm able to do that. But perhaps a good point to start with is the current state of affairs of property rights. We've heard a lot about it. We've heard a lot of political rhetoric about it. If we are looking at property rights in South Africa, what do you currently see?
Look, I see a great deal of uncertainty. Uncertainty with the direction of play pointed wrongly. Let me explain. Look, South Africa has always had a difficult relationship with property rights. The 20th century, particularly the first half, saw some dreadful abuses of that, the dispossession of Black people's land holdings and other things. Bear in mind, when one says property, one is not necessarily talking about a stretch of land. There's improvements on that land. There's also things like bank accounts, like your bank loan, etc., etc., etc. Your pension fund, something that has been for which we have been in the news of late. Now, South Africa had this history, and one should not shy away from it. It was dreadful, and it needs to be addressed. In the mid-90s, former Minister Kader Asmal said something which really stuck in my mind: the idea that we need to bring possessions and dispossession into sensible alignment, and I can't agree with that sentiment too strongly. So something like a land reform program was sensible and necessary. The constitutional provision for property protections, I think, was under the circumstances a sensible one, which protected property from arbitrary deprivation, but did make provision for land reform policies and such like. Now, we've been through various phases of the land reform initiative. In the 90s, a lot of it was to do with assisting farm workers. To some extent, one can argue about how effective that was and whether it wasn't itself counterproductive. Under the Mbeki presidency, a lot of it was about trying to establish a class of Black commercial farmers, and crucially, at this time, it was government policy to transfer ownership. In other words, you received your properties through the land redistribution plan, which is about providing land to new market entrants. This is distinct from restitution, which was about people who had actually had this or that piece of land confiscated. Towards the end of the 2000s, that was quietly changed, and it is now government's policy that land redistribution is done through through almost the exclusive mechanism of government ownership. In other words, you are a beneficiary of land reform, but you don't get to own it. Now, it's still it's different when there are land claims through restitution, but in a sense, although that generates a lot of heat, that is not the most important part of a land reform program. A sensible land reform program has to be realistically targeted, realistically costed, and to ensure a better and more efficient use of the resources so that they benefit more people. Well, basically a combination of incompetence, venality, and ideology. Never underestimate the damage those three things can do. When people say, we can't possibly go there, there unfortunately are plenty of instances in history where we have. One of them just north of the Limpopo. You can fill in the blank yourself. We do not have a bureaucracy that can oversee a land reform program, at least not a sensible one. And I mean, it often comes down into the most trivial things. There's a lack of Afrikaans language skills amongst people working on restitution claims. Now you're dealing with, something that happened in the 1920s in the, northern Transvaal. You need someone who can understand the language to be able to go through those documents. And one reason why a lot of these things end up in court, or just can't be pushed through or withdrawn or whatever, because you simply have such a poor quality of work. The acting director general of land affairs resigned a couple of weeks ago and said staff is lazy, they're not doing their jobs. I don't know whether there's an element of self-interest in that, but it's not, by all accounts, that is probably not far from the truth. There's very little post-settlement support. So people who've been given properties or been settled on them often don't have the technical know-how or the finances to see them through. Organized agriculture has offered its support, but my understanding is that it's extremely difficult to talk to the government on this. I know of one farmer who instructed his lawyer to send a letter to the minister demanding responses to the last 30 items of correspondence they had sent. Now, I'm sure part of that might have just got lost in the post office because strange things happen there, but this is probably something. There's probably something deeper and worse going on. You also you have a situation where land is acquired by the state and not distributed, or it's distributed on the sort of caretaker basis where you can't really do anything with it. And a lot of this is apparently because seasoned officials don't expect these projects to work, and they don't want to be held accountable. So you don't actually, push it far enough that you're going to be left carrying the can. This is, this may be masquerading under the name of land reform, but it's not land reform. Once the prime exhibit for government's orientation, it's the David Ragase case, which, as I recall, you did some looking into. Now, Mr. Ragase had operated a state farm for about 10 years between the early 90s and the early 2000s, at which point he wanted to buy it. The sale was approved, and he waited and he waited. Wheels turned very slowly. About 10 years later, he kind of got wind of the fact that actually, no, you can't buy it. So he took this to court, and the government fought him tooth and nail every step of the way. And the papers said that it is government's policy that, quote, black farming households and communities should have long-term leases, not ownership. And not my words. Black farming households and communities, their own papers. There's there's an element of utter farce there. You know, it was virtually impossible for black people to own on a freehold basis land in South Africa, or at least sort of urban land, until about 1985 or 1986. To think that 25 years into democracy, you have the government fighting in court using the resources at its disposal to deny a successful black farmer the ownership of his land, of the land that he's been using, words fail me. It's insane. The other thing, and I think this often escapes attention, is the dog that didn't bark. That under the sort of property regime that developed in the pre-union era and then in the early 1910 South Africa, African reserves, or what became the homelands, did not have freehold land ownership. Basically, you had land that was allocated, that was held in trust on behalf of the government by a traditional leader. 25 years into democracy, this is still the situation. Nothing has changed there, virtually nothing. The largest single piece of land ownership, in my understanding, is the Ingonyama Trust, which is nearly about half the province of KwaZulu-Natal, in the hands of the Zulu king. And there have been some dreadful allegations of what goes on there. So you have people who, you have communities that have had a sort of agrarian mode of existence, but can't upgrade that because they can't leverage it. They already prove they own it. They can't sell it. And although I don't want to put myself too far out in the limb on this, some satellite maps I've seen of many of this old homeland show a lot of this territory is abandoned. My sense there is that people have simply, they've gone off to the cities looking for work. Social grants maybe have made hard scrabble subsistence agriculture, no longer attractive. But there still is agricultural potential. You can sometimes see where the border of the old homeland was. There's a commercial farm on one side that's functioning, but it has investment. It has, it's able to participate in an economy. On the other side, you have almost exactly the same type of land that has been abandoned. It's not being sold. It's not being leveraged. It's just being left. That deprives, the people who live there, maybe a once-off injection or the ability to upgrade their operations. It's all dreadfully, dreadfully sad. As to where we're going, well, this is the big question. And we caution that this is not necessarily a case of the government having a sort of discretionary right to come in and grab this piece and that piece, which would be bad enough. But possibly the idea of upending the entire system of land ownership in South Africa, investing everything in the state. This is kind of how it ended up in Zimbabwe. South Africa, on a purely pragmatic basis, South Africa does not have the bureaucracy to manage that. It would be a disaster. I was actually on a similar broadcast a couple of weeks ago, and I said, just imagine that commercial agriculture starts looking like the post office, because that's pretty much where we'd be going. So yes, I think that we are staring down the barrel of a crisis. And remember, once we've intruded into property on land, and maybe people can say, well, there's a lot of history. It becomes very easy to lick your lips and look at pensions. It becomes very easy to look at shares in companies. Once again, look north of the Limpopo to see it didn't stop at the farm gate. In Venezuela, it didn't stop with oil. Venezuela, by the way, I interviewed a guy about 10 years ago about this, and I said, well, what should it be doing? And he said they have the most incredible agricultural potential. And today they are, there's not only starvation, but they're having to import everything that they're able to get.
Sure. There's a lot to grapple with now, but I want to hone in on one specific thing that you've mentioned in two kind of descriptive ways, but I think they're connected. The first thing you mentioned is about leveraging property rights, and the other was about economic participation.
Yes.
Now, when we make the case that property rights can be leveraged, that it is a gateway to economic participation, what do we mean?
Well, essentially, you mean that essentially means you have collateral. Now, the most famous expression of this, and his arguments have been criticized, and I think there is something to the criticism there, is Hernando de Soto, the mystery of capital. The idea that particularly in undeveloped countries or less developed countries, people actually own a lot of stuff, but they don't have legal title. In other words, they have a possession but not property. This is particularly the case for things like homes. Across Africa, I think less than 10% of land is formally registered. And you just think about that. In Mauritania, I remember reading something. There's something like 27,000 title deeds, and about half of those were issued by the French before they left in the 60s. You know, and it's a large country. I mean, a lot of it's quite arid, but you know, you take the point. So it's the ability to say, well, you know, you have this asset and you can get a loan against it, or you can use it for some other purpose. Now, the simplest way to explain this is that South African suburbanites frequently keep their home loans open, and probably end up paying for that sucker like 3 or 4 times because, you know, they're busy buying the BMW, and you know, when Charmaine turns 21, she wants to go to London for a week that bankrupts the family, and etc. etc. But you know, you can do sensible things with that sort of money. It gets you into into a relationship where you have an asset that appreciates. Another thing is that many people are able to take the, you know, initial property, something they might, you know, like a 2-bedroom flat that they might buy when they're in their 20s, and you sell it because that, you know, that area is up and coming, and you use it to buy something else. There's a great deal of evidence of this sort of thing financing small business ventures particularly. So that's one thing. When it comes to farming, and this is of particular concern to the rural parts, it's your ability to get working capital and capital for investment. This farming debt in South Africa is about 180 billion rand, of which about 30 or 40 billion is through the land bank. So most of it is held by commercial enterprises, and the collateral that's used there is the farm itself. Now, there's a downside to this, of course, that there's been a tendency, particularly you know, as farm sizes have grown and farms have consolidated, for small operators to go under because they overcommit themselves. You know, there's that song "Mannetjies Rudy, one funny bank and it's a kop geskit." You know, that's you know, there were 65,000 commercial farmers in 1994. There's about 30,000 now. That's the way of it. But if we want to try and revive that farming economy, I think that there are certain niches that would allow, particularly for small-scale farming. There's a lot of debate about this, but you know, particularly growing high-value crops around urban centres, particularly in places with good rainfall, you know, around Pietermaritzburg or Durban. You need to have that asset to trade off, you know, for the money you need. You know, a hectare of cabbages can run you up several dozen thousand rand, you know, to produce. And this is something I really wish that those in power and those who comment on this. I remember being on a morning show with a very well-known journalist who said, "Oh, well, sure, the easiest way to deal with unemployment is just to give everyone a piece of land." And I said, "You want to go and do that? Yeah, you know, telling you, you do that for one morning and then come and speak to me. Dat is harde werk daai." But yeah, you know, farming is not easy, and it's also not always cheap. You know, yes, you can perhaps scrabble, you know, a bare subsistence living, but that is for the most part not what South Africa's people want. And there's a vast array of survey evidence that shows what South Africans want is participation in a consumer economy. Farming is not going to provide that for the for the whole population, but it can make a very useful contribution.
Now, you mentioned the amounts of land that half of KwaZulu-Natal allegedly belongs to the Ingonyama Trust, large parts of Eastern Cape and former homelands. Production starts at the border, abandoned land. Do we have any real certainty or any sensible idea of understanding who owns what in South Africa when it comes to land?
Not really. There have been two substantive attempts to do that. One was by Expropriation, and one was by the Land Department. You see, the thing is that let's put aside, all the unregistered or state-held land, which is about 20-25% of the country. I don't have those figures at my fingertips. You are sort of able to sometimes identify the race of the owner if it's held by a natural person, by a private individual. But then again, you go into the Western Cape and you see the name Fleming. I mean, is the guy white or colored? I don't know. But literally, that's the kind of thing they're to do. So you see Mkhunu, you assume that's a black guy. You see De Wet, you assume that's a white guy, sort of thing. The kicker there is that only accounts for about a third of the land in South Africa. Most of it is owned by trusts, by companies, by CSOs, and it's almost impossible to put a racial identity on that. Agri-SA tried by looking at who the beneficiaries were, but once again, I don't think that I'm not sure just how good all of that was. So the short answer is no. But that didn't stop various politicians from trying to say, well, 78% of land is owned by whites, which is basically saying the land owned under private title is supposedly owned by whites. But what they sort of miss in that, or deliberately obfuscate, is that almost every land claim has been done on the basis of a trust. In other words, one of those you can't really allocate it. And secondly, a lot of the land which is kind of lumped into that state-owned category is that homeland territory. Leon Lowe put this quite well. He said that in South Africa, people get expropriated all the time. If you're white, colored, or Indian, odds are that you have a title deed, because this was something that was available with restrictions and certain. For Black Africans, it wasn't. You just couldn't really do that. Outside of a few very specific areas like the Edendale Valley outside Pietermaritzburg or Alexandra, which is also why those places became real hotspots, because there was a certain sense of you had played by the rules of the government, and now they want to come in and push you around. There's quite rightly a very sensitive issue, but as I say, KwaZulu-Natal gets 2/3 of South Africa's rainfall. It's potentially, it's sort of that could be the country's breadbasket. A lot of that land is sort of locked into this into the Ingonyama Trust, and it's in a sense almost immune to development.
Now, on that, do I understand you correctly that in 110 years, about, let's say a century to be safe, the ownership structure of some of the most fertile land in South Africa has remained unchanged?
Not sure if it's been entirely unchanged, but it's, as I say, remained outside what is needed to integrate it into a market economy. Look, I do urge caution when converting to title. I think that there is experience from around the world that people do get taken advantage of. You're introducing a sort of new a new reality, which is often very difficult for people who have lived in the sort of traditional, what they call accumulated rights framework. So, I don't think that necessarily handing out title deeds is all in the big bang is necessarily always the greatest solution, but certainly to move towards that. Certainly to move towards ownership, and to at least give security, so that you are at least able to make some small additions, small investments. I mean, that's another thing. The term investment. We often think that's like Santon City and sprawling factories producing computers and but often. The ability to improve or invest is really modest. It's building a fence, it's digging a latrine, and I can cite examples of where people have been prevented from doing that because someone else had a claim on had some sort of claim on their property. Particular issue across the continent for widows, and hey, don't go out of our borders. I mean, plenty of it happens here. Women who essentially have been subsistence farmers all their lives, but the husband dies and they are then somehow sort of excluded from the clan. And one way that they can be pushed off if they just refuse to go is you just keep on ripping down the fences so they can't, the livestock scatters, or you say, well, you can't dig a new pit latrine. So yeah, it's hectic. I mean, there's a very strong human rights dimension to this.
So, I think one of the challenges with the land debate is a lot of just untested assumptions of either the importance of land, or the ownership of the land, or the unimportance of the land, or the economic value of the land. Take us through what you think would happen if today, if on the 16th of September 2020, either the government comes out and say property rights will be defended, and then perhaps also take us through what you think the series of events will be if they say 16 September 2020, we have just amended Section 25 of the Constitution.
Well, look, there is a fair amount of evidence that suggests that over the past couple of years there has been a fall off in agricultural investment, which it can be attributed to various things. I mean, we do have a situation, which is the greater sort of claw in the agricultural sector? Is it the drought? Is it the general economic situation, or is it policy? I think that it's legitimate to argue about that, but I think the policy is the one thing we actually have control over. Now, I think that the government has done an enormous amount of damage by floating this idea that we're about to have this radical movement where we will right every wrong and we'll emulate Zimbabwe just without getting anything wrong, etc., etc., etc. But so huge changes are coming. But don't worry, it's not really going to hurt you, so keep on investing. What government has actually done something quite remarkable. It's managed to. The one thing it'll concede from time to time is it's got a problem with policy certainty. Now, so policy certainty isn't always the greatest thing, because you can be certain of bad policy. If you live in Venezuela, you kind of always know it's going to get worse. But what the government has done is it's give it enough certainty that policy is going to be bad to chase things away, but not enough certainty about what it's going to look like to plan around it. So it's a perfect, it's two own goals. You don't get that often. Just write that one down. So if government said we are pulling away from that, I think that you would see some hesitancy. I think there's there's a credibility gap. But I think that South Africa has the agricultural economy, and it has the experience. It has experienced farmers that they could start seriously looking at turning at upgrading the agricultural powerhouse. A country like Australia has a hugely valuable relationship with Southeast Asia and China, exporting agricultural goods. You buy beef in a Taiwanese supermarket, it's either Australian or American. And those are countries where that sort of demand is increasing, and that's something that we could step into. And I think that you also, if we are willing to say, okay, we are abandoning expropriation without compensation, and we are moving to something else that makes sense, a proper land reform program, one that defends property rights, one that actually starts to give user rights and then ownership to people in homelands, one that says we have 4,000 farms on the state's books. Let's start distributing them. Remember, there are also many farmers who are now in their 60s and 70s who want to retire, and the kids aren't particularly interested in taking over anymore. That is what happens. In Australia, apparently the average age of a farmer is like 59 or something. I'd imagine it's probably the same here amongst our commercial farmers. Well, yes, let's get some of those enterprising guys who actually want to farm commercially. Something else we have to do: establish what the actual demand is. There's no survey that actually shows that it's enormous. It's probably quite doable with the resources we have. But I always ask the question. You know what I said? Incompetence, venality, and ideology. That doesn't want to ask the question practicality. Let's establish, and I'm pretty sure this is actually a problem we could deal with if you wanted to. Okay, so that's the good side. On the bad side, 16th of September, they are amending the Constitution. They're effectively taking the safety off the gun. Well, the thing that has to happen subsequently is a new expropriation bill, which, let's say, expands those powers. I think what you would see there would be a rush of. I think for the first couple of months they wouldn't be quite sure what to do with it. It would sort of be, we do not have a very coherent bureaucracy. But then, I think there would be there would be some pressure probably from local political barons, wanting this farm or this building or whatever. And you start to do it. There'll be a couple of congratulatory articles in certain progressive publications, and yes, there'll be blowback. Farmers would start to wonder whether there's any point in planting. I think it's the sentiment more than anything. What could happen then is that there would probably be some element of panic. You would see projections for harvest plummeting, and something has to be done. So what I suspect, one of two things: there's a desperate effort to correct things, where you maybe invite a couple of big agricultural firms to say, well, we need you guys to produce. So in other words, you end up with a much more concentrated system, where these guys essentially will put in only what they're going to take out. They have no particular commitment. This is purely a money-making thing, but it destroys the sort of family farm or small commercial operator. Alternatively, they go for more of the same and they nationalize all land along the lines of minerals or whatever. and they try to use a combination of blandishments and exhortation and shifting policy until it becomes a situation where nobody is really capable of doing anything with this, black or white. There's some subsistence farming going. Maybe a couple of guys managed to hang on because they've managed to make a local level deal, but farming in South Africa is essentially finished. We are, we start to have to import, pay 30-40 rand for a loaf of bread. And that's, it's not a happy story. Grain producers in Argentina start to giggle.
And when the Argentinians start giggling, something's up. Well, at least that's what Thatcher thought. But so we've gone through, I think, some very important topics. The broad context of the issue, the utility, the effect it has on people's lives, what could happen in the best case scenario, what could happen in the worst case scenario. I do think it is important to move towards the conversation of, right, having established these things, what can ordinary South Africans do? What's the game plan here to stop the worst from happening and optimize the chances for South Africa to get through this and to not go down the Venezuela-Zimbabwe route?
Well, I think there's a few things. First of all, realize that this is not a lost cause. Realize that I said this at the conference of one of the agricultural unions, when the audience in front of me was overwhelmingly white. I said, remember that your David Rachase is, has fought this thing to a standstill. There are probably thousands of other David Rachases out there. Build bridges. Start to get together. We've seen in urban centers that where homeowners feel their assets are under threat, they can come together very quickly and across borders to stand together, because they all have one thing in common. This is the biggest asset they have, and it's being threatened. So that's the first thing. Realize that we are actually that those of us who believe in property rights are actually the majority here. Your progressive journalist who's speaking for all of this group or that group has probably never been on a farm in his or her life, is not coming from that place. And there's plenty of evidence around this. We forget our surveys. You can look at Afrobarometer, very, very well respected, and generally regarded as sort of ideology neutral. Land reform is not the highest priority. It doesn't mean it doesn't have a role to play, but people, it is a manageable problem. Okay, so there's that. Secondly, don't expect some knight on a white horse to ride over the horizon. Cyril Ramaphosa, was seen as just such a figure, and has probably invested nothing, his political capital, in nothing so aggressively as an expropriation without compensation. Politicians play to their own set of incentives, and in his case, this is not to a mass movement outside. It's to people within his own party. Understand that if you say nothing, you will. If you say nothing and you do nothing, you will cede the field. And I think that's the most important thing. Oppose this every step of the way. Petitions, submissions, make your voice heard. We have done everything in our power to provide templates and opportunities for people who stand with us on this to get involved and to make it possible, and we welcome that support. But on a broader level, we're talking about, okay, how do we go from crisis management, just ensuring that we don't fall through the cracks, to actually a future in which we can achieve a sort of just outcome for those abuses that took place, and more than anything, good prospects for those looking for an agricultural career. We have to agitate for it. Most public opinion is actually on our side. What we have to do is, I think, defeat the voices that presume that they know what's best. The people who make grand statements about, well, X, Y, Z, we know all of them want this or that. There's fundamentally, to quote from one of those movies, JFK, fundamentally, people are suckers for the truth.
As often as Terence quotes 1980s action high caliber films,
It was 1992, by the way.
Oh, apologies. Yes. The idea of eradicating bad policy is, I think, something that people must get away from. There is no eradication of bad policy. There is only confrontation after confrontation that must continually fall the right direction.
No, correct. Look, let me then invoke another great piece of philosophy, this time from Rocky. I think when he's fighting Clubber Lang, they've given up on any pretense of strategy, and the announcer says, "This is a slugfest. It's about who wants it the most." And yes, there is so much to work for, to hope for, and to fight for in this country that we have got to want it enough to go that distance. Nothing is ever assured, nothing is ever guaranteed. I can't guarantee you that everything will turn out okay. But I can guarantee you that if we don't try, it won't.
I think that sums up, I think, a lot of the attitude of the Institute, and I think a countless number of South Africans who care about this and who care about liberty. And for our friends watching, I do think that I would be remiss if I didn't say that Terence has been, for more than a decade, possibly one of the most important voices in this debate. In 2007, I think the ANC adopted expropriation without compensation, put it firmly on their policy table. And for more than a decade, people like Terence and organizations like the IRR have managed to beat back advances that would have seen this battle lost long ago. How making the arguments, and Terence, I think your line of "people are a sucker for the truth" is perfect, and I think it sums it up perfectly. So I hope people will look at you and see an inspirational fighter for liberty and justice, because that is what you have been for a decade. Terence,
thank you very much.
If I give you the last word, perhaps, on this in a sentence, I always ask this at the end. If people should take away just one thing from our 45 minutes together, what do you think that one thing should be?
Understand that property rights are human rights. This is not just about your asset, not just about your possession. This is about your whole relationship with the state and your whole stake in society. People in South Africa were deprived of property as a means of excluding them from society. We need to undo that damage and integrate people who are so dispossessed, but we should never trust the government to manage or intrude in our property rights in a manner that could see that repeated.
I think that is the perfect note to end this on. Terence, thank you so much for your time. Everybody watching at home or wherever you are, look at your home, appreciate it, and remember, property rights are human rights. And if you ever wonder what to do about property rights, perhaps dust off the Rocky films and watch them and be inspired to think, you know, it's a slugfest. It's about who wants it more. And then become a friend of the IRR, and then send Terence Corrigan an email and ask him, what can I do? We want this more than those who destroy property rights. Terence, it's been an absolute joy. Thank you very much, everyone. See you again tomorrow. And never forget that your liberty is worth fighting for. Thank you.